In recent days, the media has blown it on so many stories, including an attempted terrorist attack in New York City. Instead of getting people the truth, the media rushed to hide basics. That story connects directly to disastrous reporting involving something else: two spouses of politicians. That coverage should be studied for years to come because the bias is so blatant. The most basic rules of journalism go ignored when it's convenient for people who want to support a certain viewpoint. These stories, which I'll tell you about ahead, reflect the same problem we're seeing in coverage of the Iran war. I had an AI tool run an analysis for this episode. It found that the media has completely changed how it covers an international conflict in recent years. What used to be standard is now gone. Ahead, I'll play you a clip of someone calling out CNN on CNN for what it's doing. Also today, a leading Democratic figure who is floated as a likely presidential candidate for 2028 has gone off the rails, and I seem to be the only person who's asking him what he's thinking. All that and more ahead today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you here on this 99th episode of They Stand Corrected. For those of you who are new, hi, I'm Josh Levs, and this is my podcast. It's all about fact-checking the news and telling you about the systemic problems that are preventing us from getting the truth. In order to understand what's really going on in our society, we have to get past the lies that these days are being pushed by news giants. During my years in broadcasting, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN, I saw the problems in the industry and saw how it kept getting worse. While I was fact-checking politicians and pundits on the air at CNN, I wanted to fact-check the media. I couldn't then, but I can now. As I prepare for next week's episode, which will be the 100th episode, I have been getting voice messages from listeners. If you want to send one in, you'll find instructions about it in the newsletter. Speaking of the newsletter, it comes along with this show and is packed with links, facts, and information. I don't expect you to take my word for anything. It's free, and this show relies on your support. So there are perks for people who become paid subscribers. They get additional content. I want to thank everyone who has been doing that and people who have been jumping in at PayPal and this new thing, buymeacoffee.com/JoshLibs to support this show. Thank you so much. I'm going to start today with the attempted terrorist attack in New York. As soon as the news broke, the media hid basic details. Here's an example of an early report. This one's from NBC.
Two people are in custody in New York City after protests outside of the mayor's residence turned violent. The NYPD says the suspects are accused of throwing incendiary devices toward a small group of anti-Islam protesters led by a right-wing influencer.
Turned violent, and they got in the words anti-Islam protesters. That is typical of what a lot of the media was saying. ABC said something similar. Their headline said police arrested several people after a suspicious device was thrown during a protest at Gracie Mansion. That's where the New York City mayor lives, who is currently Zohran Mamdani. All of this reporting ignored what was already known immediately about the people who carried out the attack. The New York Times coverage is some of the worst, of course. Their headline said, "Smoking jars of metal and fuses thrown at protest near mayor's house." And then they got into their subheadline that 6 people were arrested after anti-Islamic protesters led by the right-wing activist Jake Lang clashed with counter-protesters near Gracie Mansion. All right, let me break this down for you. What the media started doing right after this happened was telling you that there was something thrown and that there were anti-Islamic protesters and that there was right-wing activism going on. Here's what actually happened. There were apparently about 20 people protesting outside the mansion. I've reported on Zohran Mamdani in the past, the anti-democratic threat he has made. Anyway, there was a group of people there protesting. Now, is it accurate to call them anti-Islam or anti-Islamic? I have not spoken with these 20 people. Maybe it is, but the people calling them this haven't spoken with them either. They called their little protest "Stop the Islamic Takeover." If they are standing against Islamists who want to force certain rules onto all of society, then that's not bigotry against Muslim people. If they are opposing the existence of all Muslim people, then obviously that's bigotry. The media never tells you any of this. Anyway, there were way more counter protesters there, like 125 of them. And of course, the counter protesters called their effort a stand against hate. And of course, it's that side that ended up bringing would-be bombs into this. Here's what we know as I record this. Apparently, there was some violence between these two groups. It's not clear exactly how it started. Apparently, someone in that first small group pepper sprayed someone in the counter protests, but why that happened, what went on before it, we don't know. But then two people from the counter protest group came along. And, you can hear this from Jessica Tisch. She's the commissioner of the New York City Police Department.
A counter protester identified as Amir Balat, an 18-year-old man, lit and threw an ignited device toward the protest area, landing in the crosswalk. Witnesses reported seeing flames and smoke as it traveled through the air before it struck a barrier and extinguished itself a few feet from police officers. Mr. Balat then ran southbound and gets a second device from a man tentatively ID'd as Ibrahim Nick, 19 years old. Mr. Balat lights the device and starts running with it. He then drops the device. Officers immediately secured the area, and they took both men into custody.
Witnesses said that at least one of these guys shouted Allahu Akbar, and these devices had shrapnel inside of them. Tisch followed up the news conference by saying that these were bombs, and suspicious materials were found in a car that these guys had apparently taken there. And the latest indications are that they say they did this for Islam and for ISIS, the Islamic State. Throughout all this, I have been checking on the media, starting with the New York Times website. When the news broke, and then when word came in that it was a bomb, and when the links to ISIS came in, the Times nevertheless kept burying the story. An attempted terrorist attack in New York was not a top story, according to the decision makers at the New York Times. I went to their main page and scrolled through tons of stories to even find a link to any coverage. Scrolling through stories meant going past things like their latest worshipful portrayal of this pro-terror radical guy named Mahmoud Khalil. I've reported on him. I scrolled through stories about the Met and medical stories and various societal stories. And then finally, there's a tiny blurb. In the physical paper, meanwhile, nothing on the front page. I'm looking at the front pages since this happened. They do have a front page story about how teens are managing to use their cell phones during the day when they're not supposed to at school, but not the attempted terrorist attack in New York. I know this sounds like a joke, but it's not there. Speaking of jokes, listen to what CNN did. They wrote about these two young terrorists. Here is CNN's summary. Two Pennsylvania teenagers crossed into New York City Saturday morning for what could have been a normal day, enjoying the city during abnormally warm weather. But in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change as the pair would be arrested for throwing homemade bombs during an anti-Muslim protest outside of Mayor Zohran Mamdani's home. That is CNN's coverage. These two young men had their lives drastically change when they were arrested. After people called this out online, CNN pulled the summary and put an editor's note saying that the summary did not reflect the gravity of the incident, thereby breaching the editorial standards we require for all our reporting. Yes, because CNN makes sure to require editorial standards. Alrighty then. Here is what's behind all of this. I've told you about the drama triangle, victim, villain, hero. They cannot let the group of people who could have been bombed and killed, they can't let them be victims. So the story has to be buried, and we can't acknowledge the possibility that there were extremists among the counter-protesters who support violence, or in this case specifically, Islamist terrorism. So instead, the whole story had to be twisted. Meanwhile, the media kept running with a quote from a spokesman for the Mamdanis saying that the mayor and the first lady are both safe, and saying the events are a stark reminder of the threats they both face regularly. Huh? How does this serve as a reminder of threats that they face? The side that brought the bomb was the side that supports them in this. Speaking of facing threats regularly in New York, I should tell you the latest figures. I haven't given you them yet on this show. In New York, in all of 2025, 57% of hate crimes were carried out against Jewish people, even though Jewish people are 10% of New York City. And in January of this year, 2026, the number of hate crimes against Jewish people almost tripled from January 2025. So you want to talk about who's facing attacks regularly. And I point this out because that quote about this incident somehow being a reminder of the threats the Mamdanis face regularly, that quote is everywhere in the news. So people are getting the impression that that's the case. Yet very few Americans have heard about the state of hate crimes against Jewish people in New York who are facing threats regularly. That is the warped world the media is giving you. But that is only one of two stories coming out of New York right now that summarizes this. In recent days, there has been some reporting about the wives of two New York Democrats. Mamdani is one of them. The other is Dan Goldman, who is running for re-election to Congress up against a buddy of Mamdani's, Brad Lander. I've told you about Brad Lander before. His top paid advisor wished death on Biden and supports Hamas and pushes insane conspiracy theories. Somehow Brad Lander didn't manage to find that out until a website exposed it, and he said he's no longer working with him. Anyway, in that race, Dan Goldman is the incumbent, and there are people who want him to lose, who want Brad Lander to win the primary. They went through the social media history of Corinne Levy Goldman. And of course, when they found stuff they wanted to put out there about her, the New York Times ran with it, even though it's not that interesting or unusual. Here is a clip from the New York Times report.
Most of the activity came in the days and weeks following the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023, when the Goldman family was in Israel and forced to take shelter while there. In one instance, she liked a post from Attend Wokeness that showed people holding a Jews for Palestine sign with the message, "Chickens for KFC." She also liked posts suggesting that people supporting Free Palestine be sent to Gaza to live under its rules.
I should go and like those posts right now. Jews for Palestine are chickens for KFC currently because both Palestinian governments support and pay for the slaughter of Jews. It's called pay for slay. What's not to understand there? And people chanting that should try to go live under those Islamist theocratic governments that have no basic freedoms. It's so easy for people in America and other parts of the West to chant these slogans they're being told to chant, and they have no clue what they're even talking about. She also apparently liked a tweet calling a Black Lives Matter group a terrorist organization. And at the time, it was acting like one. It openly celebrated the October 7th terrorists, saying it supported them. Black Lives Matter is not a single entity, and who knows whether she understood that or whatever. And she was hiding in bomb shelters with her kids. How is this even a story? Meanwhile, not the New York Times, but a couple of other news agencies that are not big so-called mainstream outlets. They exposed what Rama Douaji, wife of Mamdani, has liked on social media. And this stuff is horrifying. She liked social media posts celebrating and supporting the October 7th massacres. The first report came from a website called Jewish Insider. I've mentioned them before. They were the first ones to come out with the stuff about Brad Lander. The New York Times did not. Anyway, after that stuff came out and the New York Times could not completely hide from it, they framed a story around making her a victim. And what I wanted to now is show you the difference between these two things. That's what I was saying earlier should be studied. Okay, I'm going to take you back for a second to the New York Times report on Corinne Levy Goldman. They said she did this.
either liked or recirculated a series of social media posts, several from right-wing accounts, that used what some saw as insensitive or hateful language directed at Palestinians and groups or people who supported them or criticized Israel.
Hateful or insensitive language. Meanwhile, for Rama Douaji, they said this.
Ms. Douaji liked posts on Instagram that were supportive of the Palestinian cause immediately after the October 7th attacks.
The Palestinian cause. That's all. Just the Palestinian cause. Nothing about hateful or insensitive. And while the Times pointed out that Dan Goldman's wife was liking posts from right-wing accounts, the coverage of Mamdani's wife doesn't mention that she's liking posts from left-wing accounts. In fact, from this coverage, you wouldn't even know that left-wing accounts exist. The Free Press followed up with their own report about way more things that she liked. And this hit home for the New York Times, and they didn't even report it. This is how extreme this example gets. All right, follow me here. In 2024, the New York Times finally reported on the mass rapes that had occurred on October 7th. Hate groups online insisted that that was all fake and that the New York Times was taking part in fabricating it. Rama Douaji liked a post saying that, and the New York Times, as of this moment, has not bothered to report this. It doesn't match their effort to present Mamdani and the far left as always being victims. Some people are trying to use a technicality here. They're saying, well, Dan Goldman's wife is a treasurer within his campaign, and Rama Douaji was not an official inside Mamdani's mayoral campaign, but she's the freaking first lady of New York City, and the media are profiling her. Obviously, she's relevant and now influential. But news giants run away from these facts because they don't fit the narratives they want to give you. That twisted way of thinking also helps explain the terrible coverage you're getting from the Iran war and why California Governor Gavin Newsom was recently given a free pass by big media. News used to spread like this. But in this era, it comes at us from all directions all day long.
Some breaking news.
Officials are investigating.
Breaking news.
More updates coming soon.
And so many people are weighing in with opinions and theories, spewing uninformed nonsense all around us. It's like we're caught in this cacophony of noise. Big media is a big part of the problem. They're getting more desperate to be heard in all that noise and setting aside journalism to say, hey, pay attention to us over here. Humans are not designed to be overwhelmed with information like this. It's mentally unhealthy. This show aims to end that. I think of it like coming along with a triangle and saying, let's all take a deep breath and focus on truth. For this block of time, all that noise is gone. Together, we focus on facts plus context, so we can make decisions in the world based on what's really going on, not what liars want us to believe. That is the blueprint for every episode I produce. If you value that formula and believe it should reach more people, please consider supporting the show at whatever level works for you. Find out how at the link in the show notes or at my website, joshlebs.com. Your support makes all this work possible. I noticed that the coverage of the war in Iran has been very different from how the media has previously reported on military conflicts that the United States is a part of. So I had an AI tool do a really big picture analysis. AI tools are not useful for fact-checking. They can make tons of mistakes. I do my own fact-checking, but they're generally very good at processing huge sums of information. What this analysis found is really significant, and it should help you understand what's going on with coverage of this war. To help explain it, I'm going to bring us back to 2017 after the United States bombed Syria. This was Fareed Zakaria, on CNN.
I think Donald Trump became president of the United States. Candidate Trump had said that he would never get involved in the Syrian civil war. He told President Obama, you cannot do this without the authorization of Congress. President Trump recognized that the president of the United States does have to act to enforce international norms, does have to have this broader moral and political purpose. He talked about America's role in enforcing justice in the world. It was the kind of rhetoric that we have come to expect from American presidents since Harry Truman.
When Fareed said that, it was controversial. A lot of people said Trump was so not presidential in any way and that he shouldn't be discussed in those terms. But responding to military action this way was part of the norm for the media, pausing from politics for at least a bit to stop and look at the role of the United States under any leader in the broader world, discussing this whole idea of the United States standing for something in humanity and showing that kind of leadership. That was normal. I wanted to know how long the media used to spend doing that. So Gemini, this AI tool from Google, pieced through tons of reporting from the big news outlets for me. And here's what it found. We're going to go back even further for perspective here. Back in 2011, under President Obama, the United States joined several other nations in launching airstrikes on Libya. According to this analysis, after that happened in 2011, for the next 4 days, the reporting was dominated by things that Americans could come together over, like the reasons for this choice, why taking on Libya could be a good thing, the evil acts of Libya, the dangers that the Libyan regime was presenting to the world. So about 4 days at that point before rushing back into partisan battles being the dominant coverage. And I will note that longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi was killed in those strikes. Then 2017, under Trump, the attack in Syria you just heard about. There, the period of the kind of news that could bring people together, no matter where they stand politically, that was about 48 hours. All right, so about half as long as it had been in 2011. This time, the current war in Iran, basically zero. If anything, there might have been a few hours of it, but the news pretty much went straight into partisan bickering. That speaks to what I've told you about in the past. In a desperate effort to get people to pay attention in the rage economy, news agencies rush to tap into people's anger. The sooner they can get people angry, and the more angry they can get them, the more clicks they can get, the more eyes and ears they can get. This analysis done by AI found something that I reported. It's extremely unusual in the past, almost unheard of, for media giants to suddenly run with propaganda from the enemy nation, as they did in this case, with Iran claiming all this stuff through quote-unquote semi-official news. I can tell you how this works. Big mainstream outlets know that people who get angry at the left are most likely to turn to right-wing media. So they want to get people who get angry at the right and angry at Trump, so they rush to do the same thing. In the real world, there was support for this from both sides of the aisle. Last week, I played you Senator Chris Coons, a Democrat, praising this. And there were foreign leaders who praised these moves. I told you about the leaders of Australia and Canada, among others. So the idea that this was just from the very beginning as simple as partisan bickering is false. But it also is controversial and should be controversial, and the debates should be part of the coverage. And awful things happen in every war. You don't have to choose one or the other. Quality reporting would tell you about the dangers that Iran presents to the world and the very serious questions about the Trump administration doing this and what Trump himself has shown the world in other ways and whether he can be trusted. All of these things can be discussed within the realm of facts plus context. But that's not what you're getting. Instead, you're getting a rush into anger. And that means very often downplaying or ignoring basics in coverage. I have said many times that news agencies have become open mic nights where they just let people get on the air and say whatever. The only good thing about that is that once in a while, someone actually uses it to call out the media for what they do. That happened the other day on CNN. former ambassador to the United States from Israel, Michael Oren, was interviewed right after a report from Lebanon.
A very lengthy report, which somehow did not mention the 220 rockets that Hezbollah has fired at northern Israel in the last 5 days. That has displaced thousands of people, wounded dozens, killed. I mean, if you don't do that, you have not done your job as a reporter. It looks like
he is reporting on the ground. Hang on. He is reporting on the ground about Lebanon, just to be fair. But I hear your point about how Israel is also being attacked.
We have 1 million people under fire from Hezbollah tonight. If your family was being shot at 10, 20 times a day, believe me, you'd want your army to do exactly the same thing.
And you can hear the CNN anchor jumping in to try to make that criticism go away. In this conflict, even the deaths of U.S. troops are being politicized faster than ever. Amid all this, as you hear people talk politically about the deaths of U.S. soldiers, you don't hear any mention of how Iran is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of U.S. soldiers. Just a couple of years ago, Iran's proxies killed U.S. troops in Jordan. U.S. news agencies downplayed that at the time. It didn't fuel anger, which didn't fuel clicks. Anger is the new currency, and it is preventing people from getting basic information about what's going on in this war. And it isn't just the general public that's misinformed. A guy considered a top contender in the next presidential race just displayed his own ignorance. As a rule, I don't do social media battles, and I encourage other people not to as well. They're generally just a waste of time. But social media can be a great tool to get people truth. In fact, social media is an important tool to fight back in the mimetic warfare and influencing brand connectomes, two things you've heard about on this show. You can find me on social media. On most of the platforms, I have my name. And since I am no expert at creating pretty graphics, I am happy to say that a listener to this show is now helping me with the content I'm sharing on Instagram. He is at Gabe Draws, Gabe Draws. He is awesome. Thank you, Gabe. So if you are on social media platforms, find me at Josh Lebs. You will see that sometimes somebody posts a lie and I reply and I say, that's factually untrue. Here are some facts. But that's not a battle because I don't go back and look at whether they even replied to that. So not wasting my time on that. Focusing on putting this together for you. But I see your shares, your likes, the way you amplify that content, and it helps drive the audience for this show. So let's hook up there on social media platforms at Josh Lebs, JoshLevs. Now that we are in 2026, politicians who plan to run for president are starting to get themselves in the media. One of the big names on the Democratic side is California Governor Gavin Newsom. What candidates do on the right and left is try to appeal to people at the further edges of both halves, because that's how you win a primary. So Gavin Newsom went on a left-wing podcast show called Pod Save America and tried to play into feelings about the United States and Iran and, of course, Israel.
I mean, Freeman and others are talking about it appropriately, sort of an apartheid state. They couldn't even, I mean, we're talking about regime change. For 2 years, they haven't even been able to solve the Hamas question in Israel.
There's so much wrong with that. First, the apartheid thing is insane and makes no sense. All citizens of Israel, including Arab citizens, have equal rights. And an Arab citizen is on the Supreme Court. Another one runs the nation's top bank. This stuff was unimaginable under actual apartheid. The widespread belief in the apartheid lie is a successful form of radicalization that the media has helped establish. People believe this nonsense, and it erases the actual experiences of people in South Africa. It also erases how Nelson Mandela praised Israel and supported it being a Jewish state. People just don't want to hear this stuff. Anyway, no one in the news pointed this out because it doesn't help them, but I listened to what he actually said there and realized that the words themselves don't even make sense. Like, literally, what does he think this means?
For 2 years, they haven't even been able to solve the Hamas question in Israel.
What? Which question is that? The only place in the world that's been absolutely clear about Hamas is Israel, that it's a terrorist network backed by Iran that must be ended. According to him, who is they? And what is the question that he thinks has not been solved? The level of intelligence and knowledge that he's reflecting in those comments puts him on par with the people on the street that Jimmy Kimmel airs to show that people don't know anything.
Do you support his choice of Jed Clampett to lead the Department of Energy?
I don't know much about the guy.
What you've heard, do you support?
What I've heard, I would support it. I think we need to get more domestic oil and gas here.
More
and
Texas tea, black gold.
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom also said he would go on Hassan Piker's live stream as a guest. Piker is the demented far-left pro-terror streamer that I've told you about. The things he says are so disturbing. I have reached out to Gavin Newsom. I asked what he was thinking with all of this. I have not heard back. This might not be strictly necessary for full disclosure, but I'd like to draw a pretty thick line around that stuff. So I will tell you I have something of a connection to him. Jennifer Siebel Newsom is a documentary filmmaker and is married to him. He's her husband. She had a documentary come out, and she and Maria Shriver had me come to LA to do a panel with them at the Paley Center for the opening of that documentary. But this was years ago, before Gavin was governor. And actually, at the time, Maria and I wrote a piece together for the Huffington Post. This was all part of my work for gender equality and modern fatherhood. Anyway, I will let you know if I hear anything back. I don't expect to. But I do expect to hear from you, at least some of you. I would love to hear from all of you. Get in touch. There are two great ways to reach me. The best is through the newsletter, and the second is a form at my website. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and rate and review this show so people find out about it and be here next week for the 100th. As always, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.